Hey, everybody. Thanks again for downloading our podcast. We are so thrilled that you continue to listen to this show, and we thank you profusely. Today's show is brought to you, as always, by Zephyr Wellness. Check out zephyrwellness.org to find out more about what we do, and also by Audible. If you haven't discovered the joy of audiobooks, check out Audible by going to audibletrial.com/nogginnotes. You can get a free 30-day trial there, and it helps us out. It helps you out by expanding and enriching your noggin with all sorts of cool information. You get a free audiobook when you go to that trial webpage, audibletrial.com/nogginnotes. And with that audiobook, you can obviously enjoy yourself, but also keep it, even if you decide to end your free trial. That's audibletrial.com/nogginnotes. This week's interview is with Matt Dutcher, who is a friend of mine now. He's graduated, and I think we started off more as a mentor-protege relationship when he was an undergraduate in college, and I was swinging by the fraternity to do these psychological talks to the undergraduates, and they all found them fairly enjoyable, I think. And Matt found his way to working for us as a volunteer, doing his internship for his undergraduate studies, and then now he's graduated and he's moved on with life, and he's doing some really cool stuff. So we talked about that. We talked about leadership, and we talked about lots of ways that we can grow and help grow others, and I found it enjoyable. So hope you will too. With all that being said, let's begin. So today's interview consists of me chatting with my buddy Matt Dutcher. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Jake.
You're going to want to come a little forward when you say that.
Closer.
Yeah, and speak up. It's we're not in church.
Okay.
There you go. And you've been doing some really cool stuff, traveling around on behalf of our fraternity. We share a fraternity, although we're about a generation and a half apart. And you're doing something called regional director for the fraternity, which basically goes around and mentors different chapters and that sort of thing. But I wanted to talk to you today about the concept of leadership, particularly leadership among young men, college-age students, and what you're seeing, how you translate those skills from when you were in college to what you're doing now and so forth. But before we get into that, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know who you are?
Yeah, my name's Matt Dutcher. I am 22 years old, just recently graduated from the University of Nevada, Reno, with a degree in human development and family studies. My years in college were great, mostly because I had a lot of great mentors to guide me along the way, Jake being one of them. I took part in student government and took some leadership roles within my fraternity and with some nonprofit organizations throughout the Reno community.
Good intro. So what are you doing now? Explain this regional directorship better than I did.
Yeah, a regional director for Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity works with a portfolio of X amount of chapters in a certain region of the country. My region is the Southwest, so California and Arizona. I work between 16 different chapters and help them really optimize their processes and also make sure that everything is running smoothly with the chapter, working mostly with the chapter's leadership, but also trying to work with the general membership as well.
What are some of the goals and targets that you're working on right now?
For our fraternity, I can't speak to other fraternities, but for our fraternity, one of the big pieces that we focus on is member development. We have a different developmental model than a lot of other chapters. Instead of having this, what some developmental models are called a pledge model, which is one semester and done, we continuously develop and have equal rights and responsibilities across all of our members. So it's, for me, really exciting because it's a breakthrough process, and I've enjoyed working on that change throughout the system and seeing a lot of the benefits that it can provide.
When I went through, it was called the Balanced Man Program. Still called that, right?
Yeah.
So what's different, I think, for the listening audience to appreciate, because you hear something like member development, and if you're not familiar with modern Greek life, you may recall movies such as Animal House, where it's getting whacked with a paddle and that kind of thing, and that really doesn't go on anymore. There's a lot of anti-hazing laws that have compelled it through law, but our fraternity back in 1991 originated this Balanced Man Program because it realized that that model of top-down authoritarianism, including violence, just doesn't work. It's not humane. It's not conducive to actual leadership. And so there's multiple stages of this development, and it is a true development. We're not like developing you through violence and compulsion anymore. We're developing you because we want to turn you into a leader, a gentleman, a scholar. So share with us the different steps, because I know what they are, but this is me interviewing you, and I want you to talk about it because it's more hip anyway. It's not any fun to hear the old guy talk about the glory days. But share those steps and what each one entails and what the end product is.
To go there, I'd like to start with the history and the genesis of the Balanced Man program. If my memory serves correctly, it started from a committee that our national board had on self-esteem of men in college. And a lot of what we saw at that point in time were a lot of men were killing themselves in college. And the suicide rate was pretty high, especially amongst fraternity men. So we tried to figure out what that was and came to the conclusion that it could be from self-esteem. And part of what was bringing down men's self-esteem in college, specifically in the Greek system, was this pledge model development.
You don't say.
Yeah. Breaking people down to build them up, as it's sometimes explained in other fraternities.
Yeah, and that's not true. I mean, we think of that in terms of the military system too, but in the military, there's an end goal, which is you want a real wholesome person who's going to be able to do a job at the end of the day, and they're not breaking them down to a breaking point that robs them of all their dignity, which is what a lot of the fraternity systems were doing. In the military, as I understand, I've never enlisted, but I have several friends who have, and the report is that what they do is they strip away your preconceived beliefs so that you fall into line with what the culture of the organization is. That's not what was going on in the Greek system.
No, and the whole genesis of hazing in the Greek system came from when the military men came back from World War II and started joining fraternities, specifically because they needed housing. Because of the GI Bill, there was this surplus of students and a deficit of student housing. So a lot of people coming back from the war ended up joining Greek system or Greek chapters, and then with that came hazing. And if you think about how harsh the military might be during basic training, there's another end goal to it, and that's because you're going to war. You're going to fight a war, and this is a very extreme circumstances that real life does not have. Not to say real life, that not supposed to invalidate the military.
It's true though. I mean,
yeah.
War doesn't happen to most people,
right?
We don't raise our hands and voluntarily enter into combat zones. Whereas that's exactly what you do when you join up with the armed forces.
Right.
So there is a component of training there, and when I teach emotional functioning, I teach that most people are trained through developmental stages to tolerate certain levels of emotion, and this is why we get people coming back from combat who've experienced PTSD.
Right.
And it used to be called something. Along the lines of shell shock or war fatigue. There's been different names over time. Now we've got a diagnosis called post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, you can get PTSD from a variety of ways, but certainly watching violence perpetrated through combat is one of them. Mm-hmm. And that was the original idea, is, well, we'll desensitize you to this, right? But then they came back, and then what? Like, you don't need to be desensitized to living, so fill in the gaps there for us.
Yeah, part of what hazing or just harsh development creates is solidarity between a group, which for the military is really important. There's a phrase in the military that I've heard, is that you're not fighting for politics, and maybe sometimes not even fighting for your country, but you're fighting for the person that's next to you. And that's that kind of solidarity that basic training creates. When the military came back and military men started to join Greek chapters, they brought that idea of solidarity into the Greek system. And what we've seen is over time that we're developing people to go on and be titans of industry, or even just having a career, being someone, a family member, but not for war. So it's just not really conducive to what civilian life would be. So what SIGEP did was turn that idea of solidarity on its head and create a developmental model that was conducive to individual development. So you're not going through as a class, quote unquote. You're going through as an individual and really finding out what your your best opportunities for growth are within this developmental system and capitalizing on that.
So the bond is no longer with a quote-unquote pledge class, like you say. I mean, people can't see your air quotes because it's audio, but they were up there. And it's not the group of people with whom you joined in that one semester. It's really with the whole chapter.
Right.
And you're integrating as you go, and this process that bends most people's minds because it's been around for 70 years, the old model, and now Sigma Phi Epsilon comes along and introduces this new model and says, hey, just recruit year round, do away with the quote unquote pledge classes, and just integrate people into the culture of the chapter as a whole, and that becomes your bond.
Right.
That's accurate, right?
Right. The way that I commonly describe it is instead of solidarity, we're creating community.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are these stages now? You don't have a one-end stage of a Hell Week anymore. There's the Sigma Challenge, the Phi Challenge, the Epsilon Challenge. That goes with the letters. And then there's Brother Mentor, and then there's Fellow. What do these stages represent, and how far can you take something like this?
Yeah, it's hard to put them into a box, and you don't really want to because each chapter, each campus is different, and they have their own spin on it and how it capitalizes to their student needs. If you take a student at a state school who maybe works 40 hours a week and commutes to campus, it's a lot different than a student at Stanford that lives on campus and spends 80 hours a week doing schoolwork. So each chapter has their own take on it, but to sum it up, essentially, the Sigma Challenge would be your introduction to the chapter, the university, and the community, and helping you get your bearings in college so that you can be successful for the next 4 or however many years to come. The Phi Challenge focuses a lot on personal development, and then the Epsilon Challenge takes a lot of personal development, furthers it, and then also focuses on professional development up until the Brother Mentor Challenge, where ideally it's about giving back to the chapter, preparing to be an alumni who can give back to the chapter, and then focusing a lot on professional development because that's typically when members are gearing up to graduate.
What are some benchmarks that people can set? So, because I want to take this away from just an advertisement for the fraternity and move it into something more generally applicable for our listening audience, if they happen to be, I love the phrase "titans of industry," but leaders of organizations or even just leaders in their own households. What types of quantifiable, observable goals or objectives do you lay out for these young men in those challenges?
Again, hard to say because each chapter is different, each campus is different, but the 5 ways that we talk about development, there's 5 different areas of development that we've classified. The first is fraternity, so we call it SIG-EP. Outside of that, the other 4 areas of development are really, really applicable to anyone in college, anyone that's looking to further themselves in and after college. And those 4 areas of development are intellectual, physical health and wellness, professional, and leadership. And those 4 areas where we've seen people succeed in growing in their growth and development, and specifically these men in their chapters, the ones that are getting the most out of their developmental experience are the ones that come from chapters that capitalize on these 4 areas.
So we're looking at maybe things like joining an organization outside the fraternity. Obviously, academic excellence is one measurement. Community involvement, maybe community service, and then probably rising to the away from just simply being a participant in an organization to being a leader. And then the giving back would probably be say you're 21, 22, 23 years old, and as a senior, taking some freshmen under your wing, that kind of thing. That's like the evolution of development. That's what I was asking about, like observable benchmarks. Because if you're listening to this and it sounds all very good and inspiring, but it's also very ethereal. If we can make it a little more concrete, what can people do in their own lives to know that they are quote unquote personally developing? Right.
There is taking from a high level, taking away from join an organization, take a leadership position. Some of the really quantifiable things that I've enjoyed seeing chapters work on are things like car maintenance 101. How do you change a car tire? How do you change your oil? How do you know what to look after in your car and to keep good car care? Things that I wish that I had learned when I was in high school, and I don't know, and things that if it weren't for this experience, I wouldn't know graduating college. You take that and you can amplify it in leadership development, having a public speaking class and having a comm professor come in and talk to our men about what are some common pitfalls, what are some areas of opportunity for everyone, but also having people actually go up and try these things and get some reps in what these different areas of development are.
So it doesn't really matter what the areas are. What matters is that you're expanding yourself in your own
Right.
personal development. And this is expected to continue through life, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
If you set the habits in place early, then they will, presumably. And what is your role then